Thank you. So quickly, Mr. Abhijit Bhandari, Mr. Vivek Agrawal, and Mr. Rajesh Kumar, thank you so much for coming. So Abhijit had been a co-founder of Grex, and Mr. Rajesh had been founder of Focus Academy. So I'll start questioning Mr. Abhijit Bhandari. Bhandari had been associated with both startups, corporate world. He had been responsible for seed funding for a couple of startups, both early stage and alpha stage. So Abhijit, the question goes to you. The first question was, in both corporate and a startup environment, you have seen marketing budgets flow, right? But what are the differentiating factors that a startup has to take compared to a well-funded corporate?
Thanks, Rajesh. Rakesh. So in corporates, you have large budgets. That's the first key differentiation, that in corporates, you have very large budgets. And even if you spend few more crores here and there, it does not matter. But in startups, obviously, if you have even few more lakhs here and there, matters a lot. So the core question is, how do you do marketing as well as in a lot of senses, marketing goes hand in hand with sales in low marketing budget or in low cost essentially. So at Grex, we were doing, first what we did was we said that can we do a lot of social media, can we reach out to a lot of customers through Facebook, through Twitter and all. But it did not work out, and we said that how do you change that? And with low cost, and we had limited budgets, back then. Still, we have limited budgets. We said that can we do grounds up things instead of going to all these fancy social media places. And we reached out personally to a lot of people that we knew. So we had we were 4 co-founders and some more people who were there. So we reached out to all the people that we knew and really did ground up talking to people, 1 hour spending with them and educating them as to what we are doing, how it is helpful and all. That helped us a lot. And just to share one example of that, I was talking to one of my colleagues from INSEAD, and I was just sharing that this is what we are doing. And she said, yes, I was talking to my father-in-law who was from IIM Bangalore. And they were chatting with each other that, yes, I also know about Grex from father-in-law, what they were talking. And they were saying, yes, and I told her, and one of my co-founders told her father-in-law that about Grex. So we reached a point where people started talking about Grex, like that. So the one thing that we did was build a lot of evangelists around us, where they started speaking on behalf of Grex. 2 is thanks to IIM Network and a lot of partners like IIM Network. We are talking to Bombay Chamber of Commerce. We have been talking to NASSCOM. We have been talking to CII. We have been talking to a lot of people who are working in this startup ecosystem, and they have been spreading word about Grex. And that's how now if you search Grex on Google and all, we come top 5 sites talk about Grex. So that's the second piece that we did. Third piece is we have few investors. Again, my family, my friends and batchmates from INSEAD IIT have invested in us. They have been talking to us, as well as they have been spreading the word and giving us a lot of good people, good network, and reach. We have reached through them to lot many people. Then spending a lot on marketing. Coming to the other side of the story, we have now hired one of the best PR agency in the country, and it helps a lot when we our first article came in CNBC, coverage in CNBC, and now in a lot of newspapers. We saw that a lot of people, the perception about your company changes a lot once you get into media, as opposed to when you are not there. So although there are means and ways where you can reach out, but get media attention. But with PR agency, we saw that it helps a lot, and they work closely with you in guiding you as to what can you do, how can you do, and what will be perceived better in media versus what you are doing. So that helped from, although it costs a lot, but we realize that it's worth it once you go through the PR agency.
Thank you so much. Actually, it reminds me that in ad world, there are 7 touch points before a consumer starts recognizing you. The first time is that, hey, who are you? I don't know you. Second time, they start recognizing brand, and by seventh time, they say, you know what, this brand I have seen somewhere. I have trust in that, and they must be really good. So that kind of things resonates with your PR, hiring a PR agency. To recapitulate, you're saying referral marketing, word-to-mouth marketing, one-is-to-one marketing really helps. Second thing, working with the bodies like CII and Bombay BSC, right? And Bombay Chamber of Commerce and IM Network helps a lot. So second question goes to Mr. Vivek Agrawal. So for starters, Mr. Vivek Agrawal started his company in 2007. The company was Service Sales Solution. And then after that, he started a Realizing.in. So if you follow your story and other startup blogs, Realizing.in just agreed to be part of Square Yards. Again, congrats to Mr. Agrawal. So the question goes to you, before you get a funding, right? How do you reach your target segment? What are the online tactics that you utilize in terms of SEM, SEO, that you want to share with the audience?
Thanks, Rakesh. So I would like to talk something about my story. So we started Realizing in 2013. At that time, online real estate space was still nascent. Madhurima is here from Common Floor, so those guys were at like 2-3 million funding. Housing was also 2-3 million. And we took some time to launch our product. The product was launched in July 2014. And within 1 week of launching the product, everyone raised huge amount of funding. So Housing raised 40 million, Prop Tiger raised 25 million, Common Floor, another huge amount. And then, so we approached a lot of VCs, and the regular answer that we were getting is that your product is good, team is good, but the space is too crowded now. It's overheated. And we don't see another player actually catching up in this space and be in top 1 or 2. So, and our funds were drying up. We had to sustain a team, and we have to acquire customers and also make revenues to sustain ourselves. So the two marketing strategies that we did, which I'll share with you, which were like those are like zero budget marketing, because we didn't have money to spend any on marketing. We didn't have money to spend on even PR, because the PR guys were asking like $1 lakh a month or 80,000 a month. So the first thing what we did was, based on our intellectual capital that we have built, and we collected a lot of data while building Realizing. So we started publishing research reports. Okay. And we started giving these research reports to all the publications for free. So one of our research reports got published in ET. It was like how builders are cheating you on carpet area. Okay, so they sell you like 2,000 square feet, but what you actually get is like 1,400 or 1,200 square feet. Okay? So that got us a lot of attention, both from the builder lobby and consumers. So people started coming onto our site like, what is the carpet area of my unit and what is the built-up area and all that. So while doing this research-based marketing, one thing I would suggest is you don't need to be normal, right? You want to create controversies. You want to be counterintuitive, right? So because if you just say that Gartner is saying this or IDC is saying this and this is the housing market going, no one will listen to you. But you actually, if you create controversies, if you publish something which is counterintuitive or counter-argumentative, people will start coming to you, and then people will listen to you, okay? So we took on this builder lobby, and a lot of builders were pissed off, like DLF and Unitech initially, but after some point of time, they actually came back to us. How can you actually help us build a a good marketing page for our project. So, so if you don't have marketing budget, but you always have the power of your mind, you can publish some research reports. The media picks up. Okay, if you do something counterintuitive, the media will pick up, and especially the startup media like Your Story or Next Big Bot. So these guys also pick up your stories. The second thing what I want to talk about is the power of SEO, search engine optimization. So when we launched Realizing, so we didn't know anything about SEO, and a lot of us in the room were from a non-technical background. So probably you might have not heard like what can SEO do for you. So I'll tell you, SEO is a great leveler. So it doesn't require money. From SEO, if you build good content on the website and you build a unique content, and if you can keep that content fresh, you can still rank above the 99 acres and Magic Bricks of the world. Okay. So after launching, when we realized the power of SEO, I started reading more about it. So there are sites like SEO Moz, and there are a couple of other sites as well. So you read them, like you know how to structure your page, what can be the meta tags, how do you actually keep your content fresh. So there's a lot of value in that, and you can do it for free. And once Google starts recognizing your content, and Google thinks that this is the best content that I need to serve to the user if he's asking a query.
Tools, so it validates the point what Vishal also was saying in the earlier session. So next question goes to Mr. Rajesh. So quickly, I was looking at Rajesh's profile, LinkedIn profile, which is near me, and in 6 years, he has started a company called FACE, okay, Focus Academy for Career Enhancement, which grew from $0 to $12 million. A lot of people might see what is $12 million, but the proof of pudding lies in its eating, right? So 1 million, 2 million, 12 million, it's a big number, and kudos to you. And suddenly, 6 years also is a very short time frame to reach that $12 million. I'd like to understand from you, when you're bootstrapped, what are the key tactics that you utilized to reach to your end customers, right? Your end customers are not only...
Which come to your mind probably are like, say, we played that game very, very well. It's a B2B play. We kind of superimposed the whole channel sales model on it. The competition or the existing opportunities, players in the space were like large players. Everyone was in the space. HCL had a very, very large, they still have. NIT is big in the space that we are. But for all of them, it was like a business unit. And they probably put some amount of serious resources around it. But for us, it was the only thing we were doing. And we did all the right things about, like, say, reaching out to the customer segment without even spending a dime. College owners do not read newspapers. Massive insight.
Oh, really? Okay.
Honestly, nobody even looks at...
You said you had a sales channel, so you went to the old tactics of cold calling or emailing.
Yeah, so they don't read emails either, so...
Okay. So the cold calling is the best way, right? That makes sense. So what is the hit ratio? I mean, cold calling.
So even the traditional call and seek an appointment doesn't work in colleges.
So what works?
Just go there and meet. So my sales team have metrics like, say, they need to have 25 meetings in every week. You just keep hitting them. Seven times you are appearing in front of the customer in a marketing parlance. We do the same thing in physical contact. So meet a prospect at least about 15 times before he is into that decision-making mode. So just keep hitting them hard. I mean,
so basically, foot to the door. Foot to the door is the most way.
Just keep hitting him. Doesn't
matter. Right. Yeah. I totally makes sense. Each business unique perspective. So we have almost reached our time, but what I'll do, I'll ask a very quick question, and this question goes to jointly to Mr. Vivek and also Mr. Bhandari. Is that what are the key parameters or aspects that VCs look at when they plan to fund, and what are the parameters you as in realizing.in provide to the prospective buyers before it plan to sell your company? So go ahead.
Yeah. So there are standard parameters which are there that they look at it. One is obviously your team, which is the most critical piece, because business keeps changing, but people remain the same. So that's the most important piece. So you have to get the right people on board. Two is what is the traction that you have achieved, which is becoming more important than revenue these days. By traction meaning, have number of users, number of customers. They may not be paid customers, but the number of customers that are using your product, at some point in time they will pay. Not sure, how long, but that's becoming a second most important factor, where a lot of these companies which are there are not profitable, not even seeing the revenues, but they're getting funding. So the second piece, third piece, obviously, is the revenue piece that most of these guys look at as to what is the revenue, not the profitability. Profitability, I don't know, like Flipkarts of the world, they are still not profitable. Many of the companies are not profitable. But revenue, at least, you should hit those numbers. So these are the three parameters that most VCs, or I would generally call investors, maybe angel investors as well, look at it before they fund. And obviously, they need to see and get convinced about the idea as well as the growth and the market possibilities of it becoming big, and 10x and 20x obviously is what they also look at it.
Okay, so the question was like, what do your potential acquirers look at while you are actually selling your company to them? So, so our story was that we got invited. So when we decided, okay, let's go through this route rather than the funding route. So we got invited by almost everyone, like the top 5 portals existing, and so they were like discussions which went on to different stages. But what I realized after those discussions was that there are like 2 or 3 key things that a potential acquirer would look. So right now, if you look at the Bansals of Flipkart or the Kunal Bahl, Snapdeal, and all these guys, they have become the biggest investors in startups, right? They are like acquiring small companies. They are doing strategic partnerships. So, so while actually you're pitching to these guys, look at something which is complementary. Okay? So if they are doing something, they are in a space, and they want to actually diversify or like integrate backwards or forwards. So they won't have the management bandwidth to do all the things themselves. So what these guys look at is like, if someone who is entrepreneurial in his mindset can come and take this role, okay, and run it for me. So if you're going to pitch that I'll make a better product than what you are already doing, so those guys have like hundreds of IITians working for them. So they said that we'll also build that. Okay, so there is no value that you can potentially bring. But if you actually offer them something which they don't have, identify the gaps, identify the areas where they want to actually go into, but they don't have the bandwidth to do that, but they're looking at someone who can actually run this as an independent P&L or a business unit. So you should try to pitch those more rather than something which can actually compete with them. Want to?
Yeah, just want to add. Just one more point, about the funding piece. Lot of times you get discouraged by, people who are rejecting you. So you will feel, okay, whether you always get into the ground that whether my idea is worth it or whether I should pursue it and all those things. We have been working on it for almost 4 years now. And in the last 1 year, we have raised 2 rounds of capital. So you have to, the conviction should remain that this is something which is workable and I will be able to work it out. I personally reached out to at least 200 odd people to fund, what we are doing. And out of that, 20 people agreed, yes, this is a good idea and we'll fund. So don't get, disheartened, because out of, almost 100 people, 80% will just say, no, this is not workable and it will not work out. But you have to keep working on it and then stick to it. And, someone will, at some point in time, will buy your piece and saying, okay, this is a good thing, we will be willing to invest. Keep informing your prospective investors. So it takes, typically today, 6 months to 1 year to raise capital. So when I last started conversation with my first investor, after 6 months he agreed and put money in the company. So don't just think that today I go to the investor and tomorrow he will fund. It does not happen that way. So you have to keep updating the investor. I'm talking of all investors that this is what I have achieved, this is what I have done, now this is what is happening, and somewhere he will feel that these guys are consistent, persistent, and they are working and they are building and they are growing, and they will at some point in time convert and become your investors.
Very insightful, Mr. Abhijit. So I'll leave the questions to audience now. 3 questions max. We're running out of time. First question. To Mr. Parthasarthi, I am Ahmedabad 78.
Hi, this is to Vivek. I think damn good presentation from all of you guys. And I just wanted to check, you very casually passed over one I thought was a very big challenge in industry today. You said do something counterintuitive and do something controversial and disruptive and you'll get attention. Yes, you'll get attention. But like the way the builder lobby must have been after you, I don't know how you got over it. I mean, they must be, it's not an easy challenge. I mean, you kind of, because I know some of these challenges. And if you can throw some light into this thing, I mean, the way today, and that I think could be a worthwhile insight.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, as a startup, you have nothing to lose, right? So they'll send you those legal documents and legal notices and all those things, but you just ignore them, don't care about them. So, because, I mean, if you're doing something right and you can prove the data, right, no one can actually harm you. So, don't believe that, I mean, taking up someone or raising a controversial issue, don't raise just for the sake of it. If you can actually back up with data, so you're good. And if you actually take consumers on your side, right? So if people are on your side, however big a challenge is, you can't go wrong. So because we backed that, so if someone asks like, how did you calculate this? So we gave the data, and we also said that if you find something is wrong in the data, just correct it, okay?
Right. So objectivity in the data is important, and you back up everything and sustain it.
I'll just add to this. He is absolutely bang on, basically. So we have also been asked a lot of times that someone will come and put up this something in, and they will say that this is all illegal. You are doing wrong things, and people used to compare if it's Sahara, that look what happened to Sahara and what happened to some other guys. You will have to shut shop and all those things. But 2, 3 things, as you rightly pointed out. One, obviously, is the support of the people that are with you, as well as the kind of customers that are there. And 2 is, if you are not done anything wrong, you have to. Laws are there, and there are people who will support you in that context, basically. So it's not that people always think about that. Someone will come on top of you and then just stop you from working. This is far from reality. If you are doing the right things, there will be supporters and you will be able to work it out.
Yeah, a very pertinent example. So we launched a marketplace called ChalkStreet. Most of you would be aware of the IAN ad ideas floating with, right? So we decided we'll probably catch up on that whole popularity that it had. We were surprised actually to know that there were more than 5 lakh searches every month for the IAN. The people are actually looking for an idea, kind of some learning platform or some such. What we effectively did was we created a portal called ianonline.in. And all that we did was we kind of branded it saying that, we have a bunch of guys who run ChalkStreet who wanted to actually make ideas dream of anybody learning everywhere through the internet live. And this is what it is. We put all the trolls what have been doing the rounds on IAN. I'm sure you on social media you would have seen. We didn't take any credit for any of those things, put all of it. That drove a lot of traffic. You'll be surprised to know the first week of IAN online and whatever purely organic we did, we had more than 30,000 visitors on the IAN online website. From there, a trickle down of about 6,000 users to our parent ChalkStreet website. This is like zilch, zero money spent. A lot of these marketing agencies or marketing portals picked up this troll, which we kind of used for good use and used as marketing. And all through the whole journey, the CTO and the CFO of our organization, dude, what if ideas cruises for using AI and all? Same logic what Mr. Bhandari was saying. We have nothing to lose, man. Like, so we'll get more publicity. From 30,000, we'll probably go to 300,000 maybe.
Right. That makes sense. Second question. So I think, okay. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, this is Prakash. So my question is to Mr. Rajesh. So as we know that we have a big skill problem staring at us in India. I mean, we have, from the numbers perspective, you see a lot of management graduates coming out, a lot of engineers coming out, but the feedback which we get from industry is all of them are not at the best quality. So are you planning to scale up your venture, and then what is your thoughts around that? That you can take it across India.
Twofold. One, this whole industry data about percentage of employable candidates is the biggest BS I've ever heard. I'll give you an anecdote. Last year, if you look at NASSCOM reports, they would have said there are 1.8 lakh IT jobs that are likely to come out. Go backward or forward, they'll say there are 15% of engineering graduates are employable in the country. I mean, it's so simple. There are about 10 lakh engineering graduates, 12 lakh engineering graduates actually coming out of our country. So this whole industry saying that only so many percentage is like say employable is a hoax at some level. This is our belief. Second, in terms of like say actual upskilling, so everybody keeps talking about like say how education is like say, still far cut out from what the industry actually wants and all of those things. It works both ways, right? So we are a white elephant in that sense. So we are a country so large, so huge. It's not actually possible that education, formal education in that sense, can actually turn things around, and the opportunities for like say enterprises like us. Now, in terms of like say what the industry wants, it's a moving target. What the technology companies wanted 6 years back, 5 years back, they don't need them anymore. So it's not possible, and I clearly see like say many more organizations. I can at least like say see 5 multi-billion-dollar organizations tapping into this opportunity if they play the game right. It's huge, and we're betting on it very, very heavily.
So is there any way that we can do the training aspect proactively, try to look at the trend where the market is going, where the demand is going to be for the skilled?
Yeah, so again, India opportunity is what the answer is for that. Like somebody earlier in the day was saying, Manoj I think was talking about how in the metros, in the cities, there are these low-hanging fruits, what everybody is after, heavy competition. Let's say tomorrow any XYZ technology becomes the hottest thing. It's a prediction. We can be rest assured it's only like say the 1% or 0.5% of the entire population which is probably going to get opportunity. If you look at the bulk of the industry, would still like say thrive on your basics of Java. I mean, to this date, of the 10 lakh or 12 lakh engineers who graduate, some stats which said that at least about 4.5, 5 lakh engineering graduates take to Java coaching. If you are in it to make money as a business, 4.5 lakhs students aspiring to learn Java is a much huger opportunity than those 5,000 people who are like say really willing to go hot on that next predictable whatever technology. The disproportionate actually.
We are still not getting Java people, so he's bang on.
So we are running late out of time. Any questions? Okay, quick. Introduce yourself first.
Hi, I'm Srinivasan. So the question is for the panelists. So while you're in the early stages of the startups, did you face any legal hassles at all, and do you need to consider any legal hassles which may come up during your journey?
So, 2 pieces I will talk about. Legal, first, whether your business itself is legal or not. That's the first question that we were facing. So everyone used to ask us whether you are legally, legally it is possible to do that or not. That's the first question, whether this is clearly, you have to understand whether this is possible or not. And we spend enormous amount of time meeting some of the best lawyers in the country to figure out whether what we are doing is legal or not. Ultimately, we had to, go to the laws and find out that, what is legal and what is not legal. Second piece is about, the other people actually, maybe some of your competitors or other people who are trying to put spanners in what you are doing, that's a separate thing. Where one of our portfolio companies earlier, the earlier guys who they were working with had put up a case on them, and then they had to fight it out and all those things. The whole point is that you can never predict those things. So, both the things I'm talking about. Still, we are talking, when I'm saying, we have met some of the lawyers again, and we are figuring out, how do we handle that given that something happens or something goes wrong. So you have to be always prepared for it. One of the things that you can do is, obviously, if you have money in your, if you have more money available to you, you can at least fight the legal case. Otherwise, you get stuck. So that helps you. Two is, if you have right channels and connections, also it helps, because one of our founder partner actually, police took him at 11 in the night, okay? And we were struggling as to what do we do now? Because they have all the particular connections that other guys had. So then we also used our own connections, found out someone in the police, and then said that he should not be arrested, he should be left, and what are the charges and all those things. And finally we could, got him out, before he could spend a night in the jail, which could have, very real possibility. But we also had to contend, and we have to work on those things. So you have to be always prepared on what can go wrong, and see that what can you do now to prevent it. Otherwise, when it hits the road, and then you have no way to work it out. It becomes extremely difficult, and there have been cases where you have to shut shop because of just that.
We had personal experience again. The third year of our business, so education in India is like say not-for-profit, right? So by definition at least. And like say there is this huge ambit of service tax which gives a lot of liberty and freedom to, or perks to, like the education sector itself. Now what is service taxable, what is not service taxable is like a huge gray area. There have been like say every budget there is some clarification which keeps coming in the other. So 3 years back there was a service tax investigation in our scheme of things, because like say we declared every year that we don't have to pay service tax. Apparently, like say, once your revenue, our auditor advised that, once your revenue crosses 10 lakhs, you have to register for your service tax. And like say, because whatever services you're offering is like ancillary education, it's not service taxable, you just have to file a nil return, which is exactly what we did. But somewhere something went wrong, I don't know how, for whatever reason, there was a service tax inquiry. It took us almost about 2.5 years to like say come clear of the whole thing. Eventually, like say they gave us whatever damages and like say additional service tax that they made us pay, which we were not duly pay. With interest, they returned the money. The entire learning from the episode is like say twofold. One, typically people, at least B-school grads, have this whole thing that kaise bhi matlab, do whatever it takes to like say kind of get things done. I don't quite subscribe to that school of thought. It's a little more longer, a little more painful to understand, read and understand what the laws say. These are very voluminous. Service tax books are like say, at least like say, much more fatter than 5 times your Kotler size books. But thanks to all the case studies that you do in a B school, so you're pretty quick on uptake and understanding. But if you do your study around all of these things, it may take a few weekends of your routine life. But if you understand it yourself, and probably like, because the consultants are also like say not up to speed. Their data or their interpretation will be like say 5 years, probably at least 3 years dated. Particularly the not so expensive ones whom you will be able to afford at a startup stage, right? So they are half-baked, they have their own interpretation. The adjudicating officer or official will also not be up to speed, trust me. So he would be like say rankling on whatever, when he prepared or when his training happened during the IRS and all of those things, he would be like say ranking on it. The most recent thing would be like totally elsewhere. And all that it takes is like say some few weekends of like say hardcore reading of what the law says and trying to make a case for yourself. And it took us 2.5 years because we were not in any hurry to like say kind of sort things out, as they call it, We didn't want to sort things. Chalne do yaar, what is the hurry? So,
Yeah, so one more thing about the legal thing that I would advise you to be very diligent on is your co-founder agreement. Okay, so I've seen one of our co-founder exit, and I exited from my first startup. I exited from that company. So, so when you start your company and your friends or your batchmates, right? So things are very rosy, and you actually allocate equities, and you allocate equities on the first day, right? So all the guys have starting equity on first day, and then they contribute through their money, their sweat, and all the knowledge. But things change when you actually reach a stage. Okay, some people may want to go back to his job. Some of you might develop another idea and start something else, right? So it's important to have that co-founder agreement in place, so that at the beginning itself, you define like what can go wrong, right? And what happens when something goes wrong. So if someone is leaving in midway, so what happens to his equity? What happens to the contribution that he has made to the company, right? How can he capitalize on that? And then what happens to the rest of the founders who are still struggling to take that ahead? So you can get the templates online of all these co-founder agreements, but it's important that you define and agree, and also try to register that. Okay, it just takes 100 rupees to register that in a court, and keep it in safe. So once things go wrong, so you can then pull it out. Otherwise, it's important to have that legal thing in place.
Truly said. I cannot disagree with you more. There's a book called Slicing the Pie. If you have not read it, it's a quite good book. It gives an objective view of what can go between different founders. Why should they take certain percentage depending on what they do? So totally agree with you. Co-founder agreement is good. Agree with Mr. Rajesh. Do your homework. Understand what is there. Take your weekends off. And again, from your perspective, Mr. Bhandari, is that don't worry. I mean, make sure you have your connections right. And that's what IIM is about, right? Making connections. So with this note, I'll say thank you to Mr. Abhijit Bhandari, Mr. Vivek Agrawal, and Rajesh Kumar. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks.